Hi and welcome to the next tutorial. In today's lesson we'll learn how to recreate this cool looking lower third using Adobe After Effects. So anyways guys, let's jump in. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to start a new composition, and I'm just going with a 1920 by 1080 pixel document. I'm just going to press OK. Then we need to come over to our text tool and we need to write some text on our composition. So I'm going to write lower and I'm just going to change the font. I'm using Azo Sans, but I'm choosing the regular version for the top layer of the lower thirds and the black version for the bottom layer. So once I've got that, then I need to duplicate that layer by pressing Ctrl D on our keyboard. I can move it over and then I can write thirds as well. So we need to duplicate that again, and I'm just going to bring this down to the bottom, and this is going to be my third and final word. But I'm going to change that to a thicker font. So now once I have all the text on my screen, all I need to do is align it. So once I have all my text, all I need to do is align it. So I'm making sure that I'm lining it to the composition, and I'm just going to align it to the horizontal and put it into the middle. And then I'm just going to move some of these text over, and I'm going to kind of eyeball it just so it kind of fits in nicely. And you can hold Shift if you want it to move around without losing the alignment. So anyways, once you're happy with that, you can then move on to the next step. So the next step is to make sure you deselect from all your layers, then come over here to your rectangle tool. You can change the fill to whatever color that you want. So I'm going to pick a blue color, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a box over that word example. So I'm just going to put that at the bottom, and I'm just going to make sure that it kind of sits in there nicely. And so that's pretty good for now. Now the next thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that you come over here while on that shape layer, and then just hold Control and double click to move the anchor point in the middle. And this will be very important for a later step. So now we need to actually start animating. So I'm going to come over to my shape layer, press S for scale. I need to unlink this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move forward in time about 20 frames, and I'm going to set a keyframe there. And then I'm going to move right back to the start, and I'm going to set this side to 2. And I'm just going to turn off all the other layers just so that you can see what I'm doing. So now we've got this box that opens up nicely like that, and it's looking pretty good at the moment. So the next thing that you have to do is we're just going to move this down a little bit. So I'm just going to bring it probably about there, just so we can put the next animation in. So I'm going to move to 20 frames again, and I'm going to set a keyframe here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the start of the playhead, and I'm going to set this side to 0. And so now if we preview that, you can see that the bar is raising up and then it comes across. That's looking pretty good, but we can make it look even better. So once you have your keyframes ready, all you need to do is easy ease your keyframes. And then once you've easy eased your keyframes, you can come over here and you can press the graph editor, and now you can start to click on these points. So if I click on this point here, and if I bring it over, and then if I do the same for the other side, and we want this kind of peak in the middle. And so we're going to do the same for the other side as well. What we are going to do is we're just going to bring that side over and then click on that point and then bring that over as well. And so now when we preview that, you can see here that it's a bit more snappy, so it just makes the animation look a little bit better. So now the next thing is to just play around with some of the timings for these things. So if you want to follow along, you can. I'm going to set the first box to open up at around about 20 frames, and then I'm going to move forward in time to probably about 31 frames, and then I'm going to move when the rectangle starts to open up. And then the final one is going to be around about there. So that's frame 47. But you can experiment with whatever you like. If you want to follow those settings, you can. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to set a position keyframe for our shape. So I'm going to come over here and press position, and then I'm going to press the stopwatch to bring up the keyframe. And I'm going to press U so that I can see all of my keyframes over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the text layers on so we can actually see what we're doing. And basically I'm just gonna move to this part of the animation, so at around about 20 frames, and I'm just going to move the Y position up in between those two words. And so if you play that back, you can see that it kind of drops down and then the rectangle opens. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we easy ease these keyframes, and we need to come over to the graph editor, and we're just gonna bring those a little bit closer together. So it just makes it a little bit more snappy. And that's cool. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to come over to this part of the animation, and we're gonna set a position keyframe for both of these two words. So we're really gonna animate them from either side. So I'm just gonna press P on our keyboard for position. Come over here, press the stopwatch, and then do the same for thirds. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the front of the playhead, and I'm just going to make sure that I click and hold and drag and move it over to the other side. Now we'll do the same for the lower word. So we'll look something like that. So now we've got these two things moving and it's looking pretty good. But if you want to come over here and then just fix up any of these things, for example, if this one is too close, we can bring it over slightly, something like that. And then what we need to do is we need to easy ease these keyframes, and then we need to come to the graph editor and then just make sure we give it a little bit of a ramp. And we need to do the same for the other keyframes as well. So I'm just going to go easy ease, and then highlight this side, and then make sure that I do the same for the other side. So when we preview that, now we've got that coming down and it's all looking pretty good. So the next thing that we have to do is we have to create a mask over the text. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna press U on the keyboard just so that we hide all of these keyframes. And I'm gonna come over here till it opens up, so roughly around there. And then I'm just gonna make sure that I deselect off everything. Come over here and then draw a box over the text. Now I'm just gonna change this color just so that I know that that's the mask. And I'm actually going to label it and call it mask text 1. And then what I'm going to do is I'm gonna duplicate that layer. And so that's going to be mask text 2. I'm going to press V on my keyboard for the selection tool, and I'm just going to move it over until it covers the other text. So once you have your masks, move back in time until you can see where that small little rectangle is. And what we need to do is we need to try and move these masks and just until they're, you know, pretty even on both sides. And so once you're happy with that, then you need to move the mask 1 under the word on the right hand side. So I'm just going to put it there, and mask 2 is going to be really above the first word. And then once you've done that, make sure you click on the words. So this one is the lower word, and then I'm just going to come over here and press alpha matte. I'm going to do the same for thirds and change that to alpha matte. And so now if you preview this, you can see that the words come out with those rectangles as well, and that's looking pretty cool. Now if you want to change any of these settings, for example, if you want to move this over slightly, you can. Just make sure that you go into the position keyframes, move to that last keyframe, and then I'm just going to move it in just so it's a touch closer. And I'm going to do the same for the thirds as well. Just going to bring it in something like that. So now that's looking pretty good, and we can move on to the next step. So now we're going to move to our example, and we're going to start to animate that in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to firstly go to my example layer, set a position keyframe, and I'm just going to set the stopwatch right there. And then I'm going to move forward in time. So I'm going to move forward in time probably about, I don't know, 16-ish frames. So I'm going to go to about frame 54. And now I'm going to move this down. So I'm just going to click it, drag it, and move it down like that. So now we've got this animation thing happening. And what we need to do is we actually need to reverse those keyframes. So I'm just going to right click on that and then go to time reverse keyframes. So now that's going to come in and it's going to appear in that rectangle. So what we need to do is we need to easy ease those keyframes, and we need to make sure that we go into the graph editor and make sure that we create that bit of a ramp there. So now it's looking pretty good. And the final thing that we need to do is we need to create a mask on that section. So to create the mask, all I'm going to do is just duplicate this layer. I'm going to bring it up to the top and I'm just going to press U. And now I want to reset this scale and take off the keyframes like that because we don't need it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename this another layer. So I'm just going to call it mask text example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to example and I'm going to change the alpha map to that mask. And so now when we preview that, now the text flies in there nicely. So if we preview the whole thing, we've got the words coming out and then we've got the text there. And that's looking pretty good. So now the final thing that we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to create a new null object. And what we need to do is we need to highlight all of these layers. And then we just need to pick whip that to the null object. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to about maybe about 3 seconds. I'm going to come over here and put in scale. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a keyframe there for scale, but then I'm going to move forward in time, maybe another, 8 frames. I'm going to bring it up to 110. So now, when we preview the animation, the text comes in and then it automatically gets a little bit bigger. Now we can move that over slightly, but what we need to do is we need to make sure that we convert this to easy ease keyframes, and then we make sure we go into the graph editor and we give it that whipping kind of motion. So now if we preview that, we've got lower thirds coming out and then it gets a little bit bigger. And that's looking pretty cool. The final thing to do is to just reverse the keyframes on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this composition about 5 seconds, and I'm just going to trim the comp to the work area. So I've just downloaded this picture from Unsplash just to give you an idea of what this whole thing looks like. So I'm just going to move it down slightly so it looks something like that. And then I'm just going to do a simple scale keyframe animation. So I'm going to press S for scale. Press the stopwatch, move it forward, and then just bring it up to about 110%, just so it gives it a little bit of movement. And you can see here that, you know, now it looks nice and it's got the words all coming out and it looks pretty cool. But what you can do with this null object over here is you can scale it to however you want. So right now we've got the keyframes that bring it up. But if you wanted it just in the bottom, you know, left-hand corner or anything like that, you can rescale this down to whatever you need. Now, the final thing that you need to do is you just need to grab these keyframes on this side, and then you just need to reverse them on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste these, and then so just move forward in time. And I'm just going to move that right to the end. And then all I'm going to do is go to keyframe assistant and then reverse, and so now it's going to bring these things back together. And so I'll do the same for all of these keyframes and we'll have a look at the finished product. And yeah, and once you've done that, that's about it. So that's a simple video on how to create a simple lower third using Adobe After Effects. Anyways guys, I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching and I will see you guys next time.